Welcome everybody, friends of R2B. Today I'm really delighted to have here with us the new guest, who is actually the wife of one of our last guests we had a couple of weeks ago, who is Professor Jeff Ollerton. Welcome, Karin Blak. So I'm really delighted and blessed to have you here. How are you, Karin?
I'm fine, and thank you for inviting me. So I'm absolutely fine. The sun here in Denmark is shining, so I'm happy.
So we're gonna talk about your book today. The title actually is The Essential Companion to Talking Therapy. That actually also received fantastic reviews. You are, of course, an author and a freelance writer. So I would like to know from you, why did you decide to write this book, and you ended up with this idea?
Right. Yes. So I'm an author, like you say, and a freelance writer, but I'm also a psychosexual and relationship therapist. And though I don't practice anymore, I just focus on writing now. I was a therapist for over 15 years. And in those 15 years, I experienced a lot of clients who didn't really know what therapy was when they first came to therapy. They had some very funny ideas of what might happen in sessions. So I thought I needed to write something. I needed to let people know what it was that they could expect from therapy, how they could prepare themselves and get the best out of their investment, because it's a financial investment, but it's also an emotional investment. And to get the best out of it, I think people need to know certain aspects of therapy. So this book, there you go, is the result, and it's quite a
nice
significant
cover.
book. It's not a short read, but it's written in a way that you can dip in and out of it, if it is that you have any questions, or you can read it from the front page to the back page. What I wanted to achieve with this book was to get people realizing what it was that they could experience, and also get to know about the ethical side of therapy, because that, when you study to become a therapist, the ethical side is very, very big, because we have to be careful how we treat people. We have to be careful how when we work with people's mental health, it's very easy to say the wrong thing, for example, or not really take into account people's whole lives, all the experiences that they've had, or minimize some of the stuff that they've experienced. There's so many different things that we can get wrong as therapists unless we have studied the ethical side of it.
Yeah.
So that was another thing. Yeah, it's really huge.
Yeah, it's very delicate. It's a very delicate field where you, of course, when you deal with the emotions of people, and you take care of them. So it's not something that, of course, needs to be treated really, really carefully. So from what I understand, is the book is for people that would like to become therapists, but also that people that actually would like to make this journey, so themselves, going into this journey. Yeah.
So primarily, the book was written for clients who wants to take this journey, this therapeutic journey. Mm-hmm. But since then, I've had feedback from therapists who've said that actually it's a really good book for therapists to read too, because it just makes some really important points about practicing as a therapist. And of course, it's full of stories, stories from my own experience as a client as well as a therapist. So
okay.
it's quite an interesting read as well.
Yes. And can you, for example, I don't know, make some examples about a story maybe that you describe in the book that also maybe is part of your life,
yeah. I mean, the way I became a therapist in the first place, which the story is right at the beginning of the book. I was sent to a psychologist by my mother, who thought I needed help. And the psychologist was, I mean, this is a long time ago now, a very long time ago. I can't even think how, you know, the numbers don't add up in my head, but it's something like 30, 40 years ago. And at the time, the training of psychologists and therapists was very different. So we're just talking about the ethical side. And that wasn't quite the same as it is now. And the emphasis on the difference between working with young people and adults hadn't quite been explored at that time. So we need to look at it in those terms. My experience as a 15-year-old being sent to a psychologist was that the psychologist would sit and say nothing. And I would sit and say nothing because I was very stubborn. And I had learned from actually from my mother, because she used to use the silent treatment when anything, when you did anything wrong, she would ignore you. And this could happen. She could be silent for 2 weeks at a time. So it was quite damaging for a child to experience the parent being like that. So I was sitting there with a silent therapist, having experienced a silent mother, and I had learned to just be silent. So I was silent too, although it was very uncomfortable. And through my silence, I thought I was winning, as if it was some kind of game that you had to win. And of course, thinking back on it, that it wasn't like that at all. But in my mind, in my 15-year-old mind, I didn't want to let anybody into my inner life. Because that was my private space. So really, you know, therapy wouldn't have worked for me at that point anyway. No, certainly not in the way that she did it. But thinking back on it, she would have been trained in a psychodynamic or psychoanalytic way. And I discovered when I started training, I did a course in psychodynamic therapy as a therapist. I discovered that actually what she did was exactly what we were being taught to do: stay silent until the client speaks. You know, so she had been trained and she was doing it to the book, but it just wasn't the way that it worked with a 15-year-old. But since then, it's all changed, and we have a lot more information now about therapy, about people, and how to work with different groups of people in society and things like that. But it wasn't like that at the time. So my very first experience of therapy was a very, very bad experience. And the first chapter goes into more detail about what happened there.
Yeah. So yeah, it's really nice because it's also it's not something, you know, from what I understand, is your story that is transformed to be readable to, you know, as many people as possible, but it starts with your story, with what you experience. So I want to ask you something that of course is related to our space of channel, YouTube channel we have, which is here to be, and the relationship between the human being and nature. How do you live this relationship? And also, I would like to ask you, how is important to cultivate, to feed this relationship in our daily life, and how we can, for example, I don't know, realize, because sometimes we are immersed in something, we need to do this, and and this. So how can we realize that we need to start to be closer to nature, and how can we do that? I don't know if you can help us in
well, there is a lot of research that's gone into the connection between humans and nature, and what it does, what nature does to humans. I mean, we know what humans do to nature, and it's a bit disastrous, but what nature does to being a human being is really quite fantastic, actually, because research has shown that our connection with nature on a regular basis will reduce stress, will reduce muscle tension, will reduce anxiety, will reduce depression. And if we have a connection with nature, even if it's just going into, I don't know, a park in the town, or sitting on the bench and looking at a tree, specifically in the summer when it's green, or even if it's having just a plant in the room that you can observe, and it's just there and it's green and it's in your room. Anything like that we can connect with has an effect of reducing our stress levels. Now, you know, I mean, it's far better than taking any pills, isn't it? So if we can have that connection every day, if we can go into our garden, into nature, and just be part of it in some kind of way, then that's going to be really, really good for us, for our mental health. How we connect with nature is, yeah.
I mean, how we can, you know, grow the connection, you know, with nature, and how we can listen more is something that I mean, you need to learn.
I wrote an article for BQ magazine. I think it came out in January. I think it was January issue. I can't quite remember. But it's also available on my blog.
Okay.
Or a version of it anyway. Okay. And so personally, I use mindfulness. Now, we have lots of different ideas of what mindfulness is. To me, it isn't so much about meditation. It's more about being mindful when we notice what it is that's in front of us. So if I go into I went for a walk with a friend of mine into the woods here. We've got some beautiful Danish woods around this area. Wow. Absolutely spectacular. And I've just come into leaf now, so they're all light green. And absolutely, yeah. And there's wild garlic now coming out and what have you. So I went for a walk with a friend of mine through the woods, and I noticed a bumblebee. And it was a queen bumblebee, and she was rustling around in the leaves on the ground, and she was obviously trying to find her little home, or find a home that was available to her. And she was lifting leaves and doing all kinds of things, and her little wings were going, and then they were still when she was on the ground. And you know, I was standing there and I was just watching every single move that she made. And I let go of all the other thoughts. Whenever they came into my mind, I just let them go, because I know that thoughts are just there. And if it's anything that I need to remember, it'll come back again at some point. So, because that's one of our issues as human beings. We worry that if we don't hold on to that thought, it's going to disappear. No,
But it's not. They will come back.
Not. Yeah, it will come back. It absolutely will. In most circumstances, it will come back again. So for us to let go, and thoughts will drive us away, will pull us away from that situation that we find ourselves in. And even now I find the same. So when I'm standing in the woods and I'm looking at this gorgeous bumblebee, sorry, I should know exactly what kind of bumblebee it was, but I can't remember. And that's irrelevant anyway. It could be any bumblebee. It was a queen anyway. And I was noticing everything that she did. And I almost developed this personal relationship with her. I started talking with her and saying, oh, well, if you lift that leaf up over there, maybe you'll find something, and things like that. And my friend,
fantastic.
yeah,
I really feel, that I was transported by your words. And I imagine, reading your book, that is gonna be, the same, being transported by this, words. And you have a really talent, because you are able to literally transport. And
thank you.
I feel that. Even when you wrote me some, you wrote me by email, and I felt the same. I was there, because you have this ability, you have this talent. And, it's amazing.
But writing is another way for me to switch off from other things. So I use writing too in a mindful way.
As a kind of living all the, you use it as a kind of meditation or something, not meditation, but just
as a switch off. But the best way of doing it, I find, is out in nature, because no matter what time of year it is, there's always something that you can see, that you can let your mind go and just watch everything that's going on. That even in the winter, there's something that you can watch and really connect with, and get that kind of personal thing, like I had with the Queen Bumblebee. She was so gorgeous. My friend thought I'd gone mad. She was just standing there looking at me, wondering what I was doing.
So that's we need to feed this connection in just small gestures, small, observing little things every day, and it's a kind of training. It would say it is a training. Yes. Karin, I would like to ask you the importance of listening and talking in the therapy process. How are important that?
So there's different ways of listening. We can listen with a critical ear, which is very often what you do in academia. So you listen with the view to applying your knowledge and seeing whether the facts of your knowledge fits with what it is that you're hearing. So that's a kind of critical way of listening. With therapy, it's different. You don't listen in that way. You listen to a person, and a lot of the time you listen in between the words, just like you might read between the lines. You listen between the words because there's a lot of meaning that comes out. So you don't just listen, you observe what it is that they're doing while they're talking, how they say things, how they're expressing themselves in many, many different ways. And when every now and again, you might ask some questions to clarify things, or you might summarize what it is that's just been said, so that you have a clear understanding, so you know whether what you have understood is actually what the client has tried to explain to you. So at that point, they also have the opportunity to say, well, no, that's not quite what I mean. And that process itself for the client means that they can reflect on what it is that they're saying. So it's not just for the therapy to clarify, it's also for the client to hear what it is that they're saying, so that they can feel it inside. Does it fit with me? And then they can see it in a different way.
Is creating a space of in which the person, in this case the client, it feels comfortable with, and can
Yeah, so that's a different thing. So the atmosphere that you develop between you and your client is that space that is that should feel safe. So if a client is in a space with a therapist and it doesn't feel safe, then they will be less likely to open up and talk and actually gain from the session.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really important, but that is apart from listening and talking. So actually what you have to do as a therapist are many, many different things all at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So creating that space is like containing a space where people feel safe enough to express everything that they need to express.
And this is what your book talk about. Also,
Yeah,
it does offer. It does
yeah, it's
offer
also part of it.
tools, actually practical tools for actually dealing with talking and listening during the therapy process.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So, and in the book, it's more for reflecting what it is clients should experience. Because any unethical kind of therapist or therapy will not feel safe. And if it doesn't feel safe, then as the client, you will pull back and you will restrict what it is that you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're not really going to gain from it. So you're wasting your money, you know, and you're wasting your time. With talking, as a therapist, talking with a client, you have in the back of your mind a lot of theories that are going around, but it's not the main part. The main part is to try and encourage your client to open up and talk about what it is that they're experiencing or have experienced. And also for them to try and see things differently, perhaps to learn to become more self-aware or reflect on their own behavior or what it is that they've said and done, but in a safe way, without accusations and all of those kind of things. So that there's a lot of things. The theories that we apply is more when we think about the client and their case in between their sessions. So there's a lot of work that goes on in between the therapist doesn't just work with the client during the session. They sit down and they write notes, and you know, it's like every client is a research case. You know, so every client you apply another theory to, and then you come up with a hypothesis, and then in the next session you might test your hypothesis to see whether it was right or wrong, except you won't put it like that to your client. But you will ask the right questions to figure out whether it is right or wrong. And if it's wrong, then you explore a little bit more, and then you find another theory that perhaps it's this, and then eventually you come up with what it is that it is, and then you can work towards a solution.
Well, it's it's very unique to have a book that covers these aspects that generally, we don't think about all these components about the therapy. So I don't think there aren't books about that. I don't know if
well, there are books, but they're mainly written for therapists rather than for clients. Yeah. And there are other books that are more tool focused on how to cope with anxiety or how to cope with depression, how to develop a happy life, and all those kind of books. But very few, if any, focus on what it is that you can expect in therapy.
Yeah, that's very, very useful. Yeah, absolutely. And are there some things that you maybe learn during the writing process yourself? And maybe because I imagine that writing a book is not something that you do just in one night, one day. Is a process. Is like you say, is a journey.
Yeah, oh, it definitely was. It was very, very intense writing this book. I got the contract with the publishers And I wrote the book in 3.5 months. So that's 120,000 words. And I didn't actually realize just how much that was in me that needed to come out in this book. But I would say, having written this book, I'm probably a better therapist now than I was before I wrote this book. But I'm not practicing anymore, so it was a very, very personal journey, because it does contain a lot of my own personal experiences going through therapy myself, but also experiences of working with clients, and writing these stories out made me look at those clients and their stories in a different way. And then I was thinking, I wish I had had the time to do exactly this after every single client that I worked with, because the kind of therapy would have been different. But you're time limited, as you know, you're time limited when you're working, and it isn't always easy to do everything that you wish you could be doing. So, but definitely, personally, I think I have a different attitude to the whole, what's it called? The whole profession of therapy now than I did when I started. And I just hope that people buy the book and actually get something out of it, and go to therapy and experience it in a different way, and really gain from it far more than they would have done if they didn't buy the book and read and dip in and out of it. So the reason why it's called the essential companion to talking therapy is because that's exactly what it is. It is the companion to talking therapy. So as you go to talking therapy, it starts off with my own story, but it also starts off with explaining how to find a therapist that suits you and your issues, because that's another thing that's really big. It's not every therapist that can work with every issue.
I see. So yes, it's very interesting and fascinating to know about all these possibilities we have, and for many people, for different kind of people, could be that different type of suitable therapist. So, we'd like to ask you if you have any project for your next future, or maybe also if there are people interested to this, if they can contact you, how can contact you, and where can find, for example, they can find your book. And then if you can give us some tips, some final tips to actually improve our our listening with the nature, because this is the focus we have in R2B.
Okay. So my project at the moment, I've just become a writer for a magazine called Discover Clean Tech.
Wow.
And it's a magazine that focuses on sustainability and biodiversity and all the positive things that are going on in the world. So I've got 2 articles coming out in that magazine in June, and they'll be available online. So I'll be tweeting them when they're out.
Okay, on your website will be available as well?
Yeah. So so I'll be putting links on my website to those articles as well when they're there. Apart from that, I'm in the process of writing another book, also based on my experience, but it's more about the psychosexual side of it, with lots of stories about becoming a psychosexual therapist and experiences as practicing. Some very interesting experiences, some very funny experiences, some sad experiences, and all kinds of things like that. So that's
gonna be a mix of experiences.
Yeah, that's right. A big mix, things that you wouldn't believe would happen. So,
wow! Look forward to to this book.
So now, what else was it you were saying, so that's the future projects. What?
Yeah, if, for example, yes, if anyone is interested to buy the book, of course, it's
All
gone.
right.
It's
Yes.
available
So
on the website, right?
it can be bought on Amazon.
Yeah.
But if people are not so happy about going through Amazon, which a lot of people are not, then there are various other websites where it is available. One of them is Bookshop. And another one is a relatively new website that supports authors.
Okay.
And it's a really nice way of buying books, and that's through Shepherd. It's called Shepherd.
We can put in the descriptions down the video. We put all these information, right? Yeah.
On my website are all the contact details for me personally.
Yeah.
So please feel free if you want to talk with me about anything about the book or what I'm doing at the moment. Feel free to contact me. Absolutely. The only thing I can't do is recommend other therapists or do therapy with anybody anymore. That's not what I do. But also actually in my book are strategies for how to survive life after therapy, because that's another thing we don't talk about. So
and nature is part of this of this strategy.
yeah. And then you were asking about some suggestions of how you can look after you. So I'm thinking your audience is very much into nature.
Yes,
and
that's right.
I think so. Let me suggest this. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks.
Go outside.
Yeah.
It can be in the middle of the city, or it can be out in nature, or it can be in your back garden. Just go outside and find something green. And then use just focus on one of your senses. Yeah. So it can be sight, it can be smell, it can be touch.
So just use the sense.
Just one sense.
One. Okay.
Just use one sense. Yeah. So if it's touch, if you choose touch, I suggest you close your eyes. Yeah. So you choose something green or something nature, not an animal preferably, but something that's still. It might, if it's windy, then it might move, but something that's not going to bite you. Okay. Or sting you. And just use one of your senses and just notice what that sense is discovering.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So
and really notice every single detail, because that in itself will switch off all that chatter in the back of our head that's constantly going. Yeah. Just use one sense. And that's the way to start off really, with being mindful with nature and beginning to notice what it is that happens in nature and our connection with it. We use one sense at a time. Then we might add another sense at some point. Yeah. And so build it up as we get used to it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it comes down to such fine detail that after a while, it just comes natural. We go into the woods like I did, and you see something and just zoom in and everything else disappears.
Yeah. The secret is the training, and we need to keep on training. Otherwise, we lose the ability.
Yeah, use it or lose it. Yeah.
So thank you very much, Karin, for these amazing tips. I found it really, really useful, and I look forward to practice tomorrow.
Or today, right now.
Today, it's nighttime here, so I'm going to bed soon.
Right.
But
I will say, if you can't find any nature, then I do have a YouTube channel that we can also post beneath, and that's full of 2-minute films that I've taken in nature around here where we live, and it's just purely for the point of focusing on nature. There's no talk or anything. It's just 2 minutes, but very amateur kind of filming, but it's 2 minutes in nature. just focusing in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And also, yeah, thanks for sharing your stories about your story about your life, how you ended up with writing your book, and also the amazing intent to disseminate these powerful tools to the people, because these are really powerful tools, I have to say. People that will receive these tools, of course, is something so precious for the life of the people.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for coming.
It's my pleasure.
To this.
Thank you for talking with me.
So yeah, look forward to hear about the next book, because it's gonna be something really intriguing. So I'm now so curious about. And yeah, thank you very much to be here with us, and yeah, see you soon with the next project.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.